Could we see some NHL offer sheets at some prominent RFAs who elected not to go down the route of salary arbitration? Could they be forcing a trade, signing an offer sheet? We'll discuss that amongst guys like Matthew Tkachuk, Pierre-Luc Dubois, or Patrick Laine. Plus 24 other players did elect salary arbitration. We have several other signings and some other trade rumors as well coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to take a look at today. First up, let's go through some more signings. Free agency does continue. As I mentioned, we're kind of starting to see the UFAs starting to dwindle a little bit. There's still some key names out there. We still don't have a signing for Kadri or Klingberg or Paul Stastny, and there's others out there too. But we do have a bunch of others, most of which are, for the most part, younger players, either RFAs, ELCs, and a few older players in UFA status. But the Maple Leafs, one of the more, I guess you could say, more higher profile signings today, signed Pierre Engvall today to a one-year deal at $2.25 million. This will make him an unrestricted free agent this time next season. So on a one-year deal, you can not eligible to negotiate an extension until you're halfway through the year into January. So we'll see where that goes. Engvall's had an up and down career, had his moments. Like last year, for example, started off real strong, completely fell off a cliff and battled his way back. By the end of the year, he was a pretty useful and productive player for them near the end and into the playoffs. So we'll see. 2.25 is kind of where I had things pegged. I know between him and Rasmus Sandin, I figured it would be somewhere between 4.5 to 4.75. Probably no more than $5 million for the two of them. It sounds like, from what we're hearing for Sandin being the only other pertinent contract for the Leafs to take care of here, that he might be looking for more closer to 3. He's not eligible for arbitration yet, so that could drag on a little bit longer, so we'll have to wait and see. I don't know if he'll get that, but it sounds what he's kind of looking for a contract more similar to like an Adam Boqvist, for example, maybe a little more. So we'll see. I'm not sure he'll get that. I think it's going to probably end up coming in around, I'm going to say closer to 2 myself. I mean, the Liljegren signed for 1.4. I don't think 2 or slightly more than 2 would be at most, but we'll see where things go. Of course, the Maple Leafs are expected to making at least one trade, maybe more. You never know, I guess, but they are going to be well over the cap now with this signing. Plus, like I said, they still have Sandin to sign, and they have there's a cap problem that they have to take care of here. So there's a lot of speculation of who that could be. They have a lot of defensemen now. They also have a lot of forwards. A lot of them could be depth forwards, maybe put on waivers. And fortunately, the Leafs tend to lose a lot of players on waivers every year, mainly because of the value signings that they end up bringing in. They usually bring in more than enough, end up losing 1 or 2 on waivers. But for a defenseman, I would suspect either Justin Holl or Jake Muzzin will be one of the two to go. Probably Holl more likely. And then up front, there's a lot of talk that Kerfoot could be the expendable forward with Calle Jarnkrok playing a similar style of game. Although Kerfoot's going to give you more offense, but not that they really need more offense, but you start to take away a little bit of offense, a little bit here or there, then suddenly if your bottom 6 is not contributing as much, and if your top 6, who are obviously very, very capable in Toronto, do go quiet for stretches, it could make things difficult to score at all. So you don't want to have too top heavy, so to speak. You got to have obviously a little bit more balance there. So we'll see where they go. But the Leafs are certainly expected to make a trade here, and I would suspect something happened in the not too distant future. The St. Louis Blues have also signed defenseman Nico Mikkola to a one-year deal valued at $1.9 million. The Florida Panthers have signed a pair of former Ottawa Senators, but they can only get two-way deals. It's funny how the former Senators players seem to really flock between the Maple Leafs and the Panthers. It's crazy how many are on each team. But Florida signs Michael Del Zotto, who was just bought out, to a one-year, two-way deal, $750,000. Of course, Del Zotto, I believe he already has like a real estate business of some sort already going in Florida, which is, I assume, what he plans to do post hockey as a full-time career, but we'll see. Of course, Florida already previously signed Colin White after he was bought out of Ottawa as well. So both of those guys bought out of Ottawa end up in Florida. And of course, they also signed Chris Tierney, who's also a former Senator. Of course, played for the Sharks for a few years before being included with that Erik Karlsson trade. Tierney, now only 28 years old, but his play has really declined hard, and he's now a UFA, signing with Florida on a one-year, two-way deal. Pretty lucrative offer for the AHL side of things, though. He gets $750 at the NHL level, $450 at the AHL level. But I do believe they cut Tierney a little slack. He's still a good hockey player, but not the same as he was even 2 years ago, let alone 3 or 4. but if I'm not mistaken, I think he's had some real issues with his back, and that's probably definitely played a role in his ability for sure. But uncanny just to see how many former Senators end up there. All their former players that no longer wanted seem to go to Florida. But Florida's such a strong team, but they need to find value signings. So we'll see if these guys can bounce back in the Sunshine State here. Of course, the Edmonton Oilers also made an interesting signing today, signing UFA for Matthias Janmark. He gets a one-year deal, $1.25 million. Of course, the Oilers are going to be in a situation too that they're going to need to move somebody out to free up enough cap space. They do have Yamamoto and Puljujarvi as RFAs still need to be signed too, so they're getting pretty tight there. Be interesting to see what they end up doing. Winnipeg signs Jansen Harkins. He gets a 2-year contract. This time it's a one-way deal, $850 at the NHL level. So that's a good deal for him, who's been kind of up and down a lot in the last couple of years. The Minnesota Wild signed their first-round pick in the 2022 NHL draft, Liam Ogren. He gets his ELC on the books now, so he's officially signed. A lot of those first-rounders have been signed here in the past week. And the Vancouver Canucks have signed goalie Michael DiPietro to a one-year deal. He essentially accepted his qualifying offer, which you don't see a lot of players doing that, but he has done that for $840,000. And with that as well, Michael DiPietro was also a player to watch in the trade mill. We talked about him maybe having interest from the Montreal Canadiens a while back. That DiPietro is a player that the Canucks, I think, would like to move. They right now have they have enough goalies already in the system, and they want to bring in a veteran to play in Abbotsford, and that kind of makes no room for DiPietro, so to speak. So it sounds like they're kind of giving up on him. They don't want to. They could have just not qualified him and made him a UFA. They obviously feel he's got some value, so they're going to intend to trade him. And there was some rumors about a trade to the Habs, but of course right now, as they sort out their business, I don't know that there's really room yet either. We know that Carey Price has a big question mark over him, and that could kind of impact where everybody else sits. You get Jake Allen on the final year of his contract, expected to likely be the main goalie to NHL, assuming Price doesn't play, for example. But for backup options to him, you have Samuel Montembeault, you have Caden Primo. I guess they could bring in DiPietro to maybe, challenge Primo at the AHL level. I don't know what they can do in that regard, but it is possibility that they could go down that road. But we'll see. Now that he's got a contract, might make it a little bit easier to make that happen. The Boston Bruins assistant coach Joe Sacco apparently will be in the mix for the head coaching job with the San Jose Sharks. Of course, Joe Sacco would know new GM Mike Girard pretty well, former teammates, and certainly Sacco's a guy who's highly regarded around the NHL, known as a pretty respectable coach, and is likely expected, I guess, at some point in the not too distant future to get a head coaching opportunity. So this very well could be the opportunity he's been looking for. We'll have to wait and see where things go. I have not heard of any other names here as of yet that are expected to be in the mix, although I'm sure that Greer will likely talk to at least a few other people before making a decision. The Coyotes writer and reporter Craig Morgan is reporting that Andrew Ladd, who has 1 year left on his contract with the Coyotes, might not play this year. He's obviously well into his mid-30s now, kind of player who's dealt with a lot of injuries. His body has a lot of miles on it after playing a very physical style of hockey for a long time, and really the bulk of that contract is paid out now. He signed a 7-year deal back with the New York Islanders. Of course, they moved that deal to the Coyotes last year, and like I said, most of that has already been paid. Now, his cap hit's $5.5 million, so if that comes off the books, if he actually officially retires, then that could be, I wouldn't call it a major issue for Arizona, but it's certainly a scenario where as of today, they're not at the cap floor, they're slightly below, but they still have, I think at least one, maybe two RFAs to sign, including Lawson Crouse, so that would be enough there to kind of get them slightly over. But if that 5.5 comes off, then they're going to go under again. But there's lots of teams out there that would love to give them a player as a salary dump. There's no doubt. I know the Ottawa Senators were rumored to be talking to them about sending Nikita Zaitsev to the Coyotes for a potential situation, but I think Ottawa's kind of waiting until they land their replacement there, because they are, scouring the market for a top 4 defenseman. That's been in the trade rumor mill now for the past few weeks. There's no secret that's something they're working on. Mackenzie Weegar continues to be a player they're very interested in, but as of right now, indications are the Panthers are trying their best to extend him. Auger is entering the final year of his contract, so he's not an RFA or a UFA or anything like that right now, but he is eligible for an extension. So if Florida runs into really severe issues during the negotiation process, they might change their mind and decide to move him, which the Senators at that point would probably pounce on that and try to get a deal done. He appears to be one of their primary targets they're looking at, but I guess at this point they're probably not necessarily expecting that to come to be, just given the fact that that it sounds like Florida wants to keep him. So obviously sending Zaitsev to Arizona is a bit delayed, but there's certainly other teams too out there. There's a lot of teams that have a contract they'd love to move, and the Coyotes could continue to take on other salary in order to get additional assets if they're able to. So we'll see. Of course, like I said, that 5.5 cap hit, he's actually earning $4 million this year total, and $3 million of it is in the form of a signing bonus, which likely should have been already paid. So he should be down to $1 million. So if he does retire, yes, he's forfeiting money, but if you think about after all the taxes that come off of that and escrow and all that, yes, it's money that he could be leaving on the table, but at the end of the day, he's got a long, lucrative career, made lots. So, he's putting himself through a lot of grind here to earn that. So he may choose to go the other road and retire. And if he legit has enough medical circumstance to dictate that he just cannot play due to that, then maybe he goes on LTIR for the year. That's a possibility as well. But either way, there's a possibility that Andrew Ladd may not be in the lineup for the Coyotes when they make their debut here in their new arena at Arizona State University this fall. Now, of course, today was an important date for a cutoff for restricted free agents to file for salary arbitration. Now, there's two ways you can file for arbitration. The player can and the team can. Now, the team's filing for salary arbitration is not something that you see very often. Typically, it's a case where sometimes a team just really wants to try to pay them less because their negotiations are going poorly, or maybe the qualifying offer is way out of whack compared to what the performance was. They can actually take the player to arbitration and have it lowered, but it's not something that's very common. Typically, players file for arbitration if the negotiations are going well. Now, there's 24 players that have done that before the cutoff here. One of them's already taken care of in Nico Mikkola, which we talked about earlier in St. Louis. So as I stress every year, salary arbitration is a process that I know sometimes fans stress a little bit over because obviously it can drag things on. The good news is the player's going to have a contract before training camp starts. The hearings for arbitration will be held between July 27th and August 11th. Out of those 24 players that filed, I'd be willing to bet that anywhere from 20 to 22 of them probably won't even make it to the hearing because a lot of times they do end up settling before they make it there. So think of salary arbitration kind of almost like a court case. You have a kind of like an arbitrator, which is basically like a judge. The team and the player are both going to make their arguments as to why their case should be, heard and why they feel that they should be the winners here, right? So the player is going to say all the good things he done well and why he should make more money. And the team's going to have to go into all the things that they don't like about the player, why they should make less. It can get ugly. It's not a pleasant scenario. A lot of times, for cases that do end up, I've done the research on this in the last decade or more, and like 90% of players who actually go through with the hearing would not settle on their own, would end up leaving the team within like a maximum 2 years. It does impact the relationships, and it does a lot. But like I said, a lot of these get solved on their own, so I don't want to have any fans stressing about this. Like I said, I'd be surprised if there's more than a couple of these end up, but it's hard to predict. Those 24 players include Mason Appleton, Winnipeg. You get Ethan Bear in Carolina, Jesper Bratt in New Jersey, Lawson Krause, of course, with the Coyotes, Morgan Geekie in Seattle, Matthew Joseph in Ottawa, Kaapo Kähkönen in San Jose, Kasperi Kapanen with the Penguins, Oliver Shillington with the Calgary Flames, Max Lajoie and Steven Lorentz as well. We've also got Isaac Lunderstrom also with the Ducks, Zach McEwen in Philly, Mikkola, as I mentioned, Andrew Mangiapane with the Flames, Jesse Puljujarvi in Edmonton, Tice Thompson, Jakub Trenin, Vitek Vanacek, Jake Wallman, Kyler Yamamoto, and Pavel Zacha now with Boston. So there's, like I said, a lot of those names you'll hear settling, but there could be possible here that they end up going through with the hearing and end up likely on a 1-year contract. Now, as I mentioned, the teams themselves with the remaining RFAs can also elect to take the player to arbitration, and their cutoff to do that is the end of tomorrow at 5 o'clock Eastern time. So we'll see if any teams do file for that, but it's not nearly as common as what we just talked about here. Now, a key part of all this is if you file for salary arbitration, you cannot just go back and accept your qualifying offer. So that would no longer be an option with these 24 guys. The other thing is if once you're in salary arbitration is you can't get an offer sheet. So obviously they take that possibility off the table here, and they will wait and go negotiate with their team while they're waiting for their hearing, see if they can come to their own conclusion of this and settlement, or they'll go through with the hearing and get a deal done the hard way. Now, there's some really key and prominent RFAs who did not elect to go through salary arbitration, and guys that include Pierre-Luc Dubois, who's been a hot topic of conversation over the past few days, Matthew Tkachuk and Patrick Laine, amongst others. Now, a couple of key things you could do and make kind of assumptions from this could be, one, maybe they're close to coming to terms on a deal and they're confident it's going to get done without getting things messy and going through this process. If you want to look at things from a positive standpoint, that might be one of the conclusions you draw. Another one would be that maybe they're open to offer sheets and they would not be opposed to getting one. And they want to make sure that if a team wants to offer them one, that they have that option. And secondly, I guess another way to look at it is without going through arbitration, there's no guarantee they get a deal done before training camp, and maybe they're not in any rush. To be honest, if they're not on great terms with the team, they want to try to force a trade or really drag things on and make it hard on the team to get what they want, then that's another way of doing it. Like, so that's the part of the reason arbitration is there, is to help them come to an agreement, and you know that it's going to be settled quickly. Without arbitration, it can drag on, it can go into training camp, it can go in beyond that. So with these players, there's now obviously some rumors, especially around Dubois being the most obvious guy, because it's been publicly confirmed by his agent and enough people around him that he 100% wants to go to Montreal. We even have comments from Kent Hughes, not explicitly saying, yes, we want Dubois, but saying we would absolutely be interested in a big, strong center that meets his description. So could this be a case where Montreal tenders an offer sheet to try to get Dubois that way? I mean, I'll show you the compensation here. Obviously, depending on what the offer was, would be determined what the Winnipeg Jets would get from compensation. Should it be acceptable? Obviously, the highest end here, over $10.2 million, is 4 first-round picks. I don't see Montreal being something that's what they would want to do. I mean, the next option here is a couple of first as well as multiple mid-round picks, and you got some options below that, a first, second, and third. That's probably one that teams would probably want to do the most. But I guess like looking at like Matthew Tkachuk, Patrick Laine, like I said, we talked yesterday about reports that Laine and the Jackets, as much as they'd like to get a deal done, rumors were he was excited when he found out Gaudreau was coming to town. But at the same time, they're about $1.5 million apart in the process here to negotiate a new deal, according to Aaron Portzline. So certainly, in Matthew Tkachuk's case, you got to wonder what he's thinking now with all the changes we've seen and a whole, potential new direction in Calgary. What's going to happen? Like, his decision is going to have a major, major impact here. So obviously, like, this tells me that these players are not opposed to offer sheets and they're not in any hurry. And if that's not necessarily good news for the teams that they're negotiating with. Like I said, it's not, like I said, you can try to put a positive spin and say, well, they're confident, it's close, it's going to get done. Maybe it is, but you got to think that there's more reasons that benefit the player than the team that kind of suggest otherwise. So with all the talk that we've seen around, especially Tkachuk and Dubois, is this a scenario where they're trying to encourage an offer sheet or force a trade? You really got to wonder if that's something that we could possibly end up seeing here after all. So time will tell, but it's certainly something that we need to keep an eye on, and it's certainly going to open things up for potential offer sheets. Now, a couple other quick items here. With the Colorado Avalanche being heavily rumored to be in the mix to bring back Nazem Kadri, they definitely need to make a trade to free up some space to make that happen. I saw an article today from Islanders Hockey Now, I believe it was, talking about the Islanders maybe being that suitor for Samuel Girard to make that happen. Of course, Samuel Girard, a very mobile, upbeat, offensive, left-shot defenseman. Looking at their roster, you got to wonder, would he be the ideal player? I mean, they've already brought in Alexander Romanov from Montreal, who's pretty good young defenseman himself, 22 years old. He needs a new deal. He could be a good addition there, but he's still young, still gaining experience. Obviously, if you look at what they have there, Noah Dobson is their top, young offensive defenseman as well. Could they go with a top four of Dobson, Pelech, Pulock, and Girard? That way you have Pelech and Pulock that are both a little stronger defensively. You got Girard and Dobson are better Offensively, Pollock's got the big shot, but not super offensive, so to speak. Then you still have guys like Romanov and Mayfield who could play on your third pair. It might not be a terrible thing for them to have more defensive depth and so for them to have a similar type of setup as what you see in Colorado. Now, I'm not suggesting that either of them are at the level of Cale Makar, but still, it's a case where it's not a terrible thing to consider. Now, of course, I don't know what the asking price for Samuel Girard would be. I'm assuming it's not going to be super cheap, but given the fact that we know that Lou needs to do something here, they also need to bring in a scorer. So to me, to have that kind of deal take place, they'd probably have to shed money elsewhere because the Avalanche are going to probably only want future type assets. They're going to want, a combination of a prospect or draft picks, which they could certainly look at doing, but at the same time, I don't know that they're going to be able to do that without shedding money elsewhere. So they're going to have to look to a team like Arizona or, maybe like Chicago, Buffalo, like teams like that have the space to maybe see if they can move a guy like a Josh Bailey, for example, or another contract that they're not so favorable for. So we'll see. It's not maybe the ideal thing because they do need a scoring forward as well for Matthew Barzal on his wing. It would certainly strengthen their back end, but it may not be the absolutely perfect deal. But I'm not sure that I'm against the trade. I just don't know if that would hinder them from making additional moves, which might be difficult. And in that case, I might suggest they go a different route and try to get the forward instead. But I know Lou's been awfully quiet. We don't know what he's up to, which isn't always a good thing. And there's a lot of Isles fans certainly frustrated with him right now. And we'll need something to happen sooner than later here. Another player to watch as well that you can see on the move is Caps center iceman Lars Eller. Between all the trades and free agent moves that they've made, that's a little bit of a crowded area now, especially if Backstrom is able to return. It's possible they could try to maybe play Eller on the wing, but even then, they've added quite a bit here, different mix of forwards right now, and Lars Eller could be kind of like an odd man out in Washington. He's got 1 year left, just a little over $3 million. Pretty good two-way center, veteran guy. I think there would be a decent amount of interest, especially if Washington wanted to even retain a little bit of salary, maybe knock that under $3 million. That might be enticing to a lot of teams to bring in for the bottom six. So no guarantee they may hang on to him, but it's somebody that even if it's not before the season starts, during the season, but they might want to wait and get a longer-term vision here on Backstrom before they do that. We'll see. But they've had lots of new changes. It wouldn't be shocking if somebody got moved out to give them some more cap flexibility regardless. So let me know your thoughts on everything discussed here today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. Stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest rumblings, rumors, and news around the entire offseason. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.